Welcome to Sit and Stay, the podcast that breaks down the challenges of starting and maintaining a mental health practice into digestible chapters. Sit and Stay is presented by RipsyTech, an electronic health record company committed to addressing the mental health crisis in the United States.
Welcome back to the Sit and Stay podcast brought to you by RipsyTech. I am one of your hosts, RipsyTech product manager Parker Anderson, and as always, I am joined by RipsyTech founder and CEO Tom Tarshis. Hi, Tom.
Hey, Parker.
Good to see you, Tom. Today we're joined by a very special guest. We have Cynthia Henrie with us. She goes by Cindy. Cynthia is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a board-certified expert in traumatic stress, specializing in feminist therapy and trauma treatment. She is the founder and director of Los Angeles Therapy Network, where she has been leading since 2005. She has a master's degree in counseling psychology from Antioch University, and she brings over 30 years of experience in social services and psychotherapy, including 15 years working with high-risk adolescents. Her expertise spans a wide range of areas, including not just anxiety and depression, but also panic disorder, OCD, LGBTQIA+ issues, and adolescent problems. And she's particularly known for her work with sexual trauma survivors and child abuse survivors, addressing complex addressing complex issues such as sexual assault, domestic violence, and cult abuse recovery. So under her leadership, Los Angeles Therapy Network provides a very safe and inclusive environment offering diverse therapeutic modalities such as sensory motor psychotherapy and eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, otherwise known as EMDR. That one's a mouthful. But she makes a very significant impact at the Los Angeles in the Los Angeles community. Oh my goodness. In the Los Angeles community through personalized and compassionate care. Cindy, I'm sorry I struggled so much to get through that, but we're happy to have you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, and Cindy, we're so thrilled to have you on, and you're officially our fourth guest, and I think Parker and I agree that these are kind of our more fun and interactive and lively episodes. So we really appreciate you taking time from your day to join us.
I was really excited to be here. Thank you.
Very good. Yeah, and so with that being said, I'm gonna just jump in so we can find out more about what your journey's been. And if we go way back to the beginning, why did you decide to enter the mental health field?
You know, I actually always had an interest in mental health. Even from a young age. My mom was a psychiatrist, and she also did, like I do now, she worked partially out of her home office. So I was exposed to mental health very young, and I think that it just was something that was a natural fit for me. So I jumped in.
Oh, that's very cool, right? So, and yeah, some of my, I know lots of people who have done this, and I can imagine, yeah, as a child, you're always a little bit curious about what your parents do, and you see the people coming in and out of maybe a separate entrance. It would probably get those questions going at an early age, and it'd be cool to have a parent who was doing that in the house.
I think also it was unique because she was a female psychiatrist in a period of time where women really they weren't accepted in the medical field, and it was in Salt Lake City, Utah, and so even then it was more further back. So she was very unique in that way. She was a leader and a forerunner in the entire mental health industry as a woman and a doctor. And so for me, it was like a point of pride, right? That was definitely something to be role modeled.
Very cool. And so even then when you were like middle school, high school, you felt like this is the path to go, therapy and mental health work, but your mom got you hooked.
Yeah, I was really interested. Like she would take me to different, she would do presentations and I would be there, because she needed to do something with me, right? So I would be in the audience just coloring, but I think so I was exposed and around it a lot. and got a lot of experience of that. And other moms were stay-at-home moms in my community, so it was really different.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. And you grew up in Utah, then it sounds like.
I grew up in Salt Lake City, and I came out to California actually for the first time when I was about 14, and then I came on my own when I was 17.
Okay.
And I've been here ever since.
So California kept you.
I've always loved the ocean and the beach, and yeah, I love California.
Very neat.
Yeah.
And then, our next question is, people in the mental health field, there's a broad range of areas you can work with and that people get passionate about. And Parker listed a lot of your interests, but we wonder what led you towards the trauma work and the work that you do.
Of course. Well, like any therapist, we're all the wounded healers, right? We all have our own wounds and that we bring to the table. So unfortunately, when I was 13, my mom committed suicide.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. That was pretty rough. And I kind of was put into boarding schools and then kind of went from there. So then I came on my own to California at 17. So I definitely brought that to the table. And of course, that's a really traumatic event. And then my first job, I started working with homeless and high-risk teens in Hollywood. And so it was a lot of, sexual exploitation, trafficking, survival sex work, stuff like that. So that was a lot of what I was exposed to in the very beginning, a lot of gangs, working with kids in gangs and stuff like that. So, and then in residential care, it was a lot of abused kids. So trauma became just my, what I saw and worked with all the time, and knew the best. And then when I started to research it and really kind of delve in, I also worked with adolescent sex offenders as well, which I think is something that makes me unique in terms of my work with sexual trauma, because I've worked with both the perpetrator side and the victim side, and having that experience and that training and that knowledge and being able to be like in the prisons with them and stuff like that. I think that gave me a whole new perspective in terms of being able to work with victims. And so it just kind of, drove me in from there.
Wow. Yeah. Gotcha. And you're so sorry to hear about your mom. And I think it's really great that you bring that up and also mention, the wounded warriors in the mental health field. Like it is very true. And I know the physician data very well that, a lot of, there's very high suicide rates among physicians, dentists, other people who work in mental health and trauma in some of these fields. And it's something that probably needs more dialogue. And I went all that experience, and then when you were really there in a lot of situations people would run from, but it sounds like that fit well with you and you engaged further. And it is very rare to have someone who works both sides of the sexual abuse spectrum. That only would make you a much better provider to both sides to have that experience. And
yeah, I think that I'm so grateful that I had that opportunity. It just so happened to be a part of the agency that I worked with, and I took an interest in it. And it was challenging. I mean, that was definitely challenging to work with perpetrators. And emotionally difficult because it's a hard thing to see. It's a hard thing to know what you're dealing with and to watch how their brains manipulate the situation and convince themselves of, things that are just outrageously not true. But me being able to research that and study it, I think it really did make it so that I am able to offer something that is really unique and different. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm more successful with the treatment of sexual trauma.
Very good. Yeah. And then tell us about, we do a lot on this podcast for people starting out on their own or who maybe want to start a group. And, we don't get much training on that in any of our educational journey.
Not at all.
Despite the fact that the majority of people in this field do work for themselves or start a practice. So did you always have the idea you were going to start your own group? Did you have a mentor who inspired you, or tell us how LA Therapy Network came about?
Well, so that's interesting. I just always wanted to be a private practice therapist and have my little practice and, live life. I never really expected to create something bigger than that. I worked for an agency for many, many years. I think it was probably 15 plus years. I was really happy doing that, but I knew at some point as Department of Mental Health kind of became more a part of the agencies, I didn't agree necessarily with the way that they wanted things done or their perspective on providing care. And so I felt that if I could provide better care, much better care, if I had the freedom to do it myself and be able to go and, get my own trainings and really build and grow my career. And both my parents were doctors, so I had a model for how to do that kind of, or at least I've seen it done. So in my head, that was what you do. A lot of clinicians actually stay in agencies and nonprofit agencies or outpatient mental health or hospitals. But for me, the I just it just seemed like it was a natural fit to do private practice. What's interesting is that I would tell a lot of people, I'm going to go into private practice, and the clinicians that I worked with who were mentors of mine frequently told me, "Oh my gosh, private practice is really hard. I don't know, it's really hard to do. I mean, I tried to do it and I couldn't do it." So I don't know, I mean, it's going to take at least 3 to 5 years to build that practice. My practice had been going within 6 months. It was full time in 6 months.
Yeah, so interesting. And I mean, even now the demand so far outweighs the supply that just being in this field, and we're all people that have had a lot of mentors, and it's interesting how, if a mentor's tried, someone else has tried something and weren't successful, they're quick to give those warnings. But, clearly as a practitioner with a little motivation and certainly skill, and I totally understand what you're saying about DMH or Department of Mental Health and restrictions on how to practice, and
Mm-hmm.
that's not always right for our patients. So
Mm-mm.
I could see that. And I can see how you would be full pretty quickly starting out on your own and not have those struggles. But it is true that there is some entrepreneurship and probably just people skills and some organizational skills that maybe those mentors didn't possess, or
Yeah, I'm not sure what made it difficult for them personally, or maybe it's just the nature of, the kinds of providers that they are. I think for me, I was just determined. Like, I'm not afraid of hard work. I'm not afraid of, learning new things. And so I think I had enough determination in that way, that helped me a lot. And I also did a lot of internet research on how to start a business. So I taught myself what I needed to know, so I taught myself, like, okay, here's marketing. Here's how you kind of do marketing. Here's ways to approach it. I would read articles and listen to coaching sessions and stuff like that. So I did actually do like about a year's worth of preparation, putting together my website and, doing all that kind of stuff. Like it took a period of time to actually do the setup part in the beginning. But once I had that set up and I knew how to do the ads and I got the ads up and running, and once I was really committed to, now I've got my first client. After that, that's when it was 6 months after that.
Gotcha.
But that first, anytime you're an entrepreneur, you have to set up your business in the front part. You have to learn a lot about taxes and, how that works and how it works with city taxes, state taxes, federal, how to do your taxes differently, how to do websites, how to do marketing, where are the best target markets, how do you create your targets, so there's a lot of things to think about.
Very true. Very true.
Who's your ideal client,
Right. At what point in the process of starting your practice did you decide to bring on other clinicians?
So I was married to a woman, and she was an aerospace engineer. She was a really top aerospace engineer. And so she was more the breadwinner and I was doing my own practice. And then she contracted Lyme disease and it got really bad. And she got to a point where she couldn't work. And so suddenly I was the person who had to be the main breadwinner and I had to make sure to pay the mortgage and to pay all the bills. And I happened to have had somebody who reached out to me who said, "Hey, I see you work with dissociative disorders. I did some training in dissociative disorders. I'd really love to learn from you. Would you be open to, being, just like being a mentor or, me working with you?" And so it kind of started from there. And so then I started hiring clinicians and, and giving and pushing advertising and marketing and really growing the business.
And how has that been being like a mentor and a boss? And how do you mix those together? Have you had to fire people?
Yeah. Yeah, I've had to get rid of people. That's been interesting. I haven't had to get rid of too many people. I think clinicians, I've had a few clinicians. I've more just phased them out. Like I just won't give them more clients. And I've had clinicians that have stolen business from me. So that does happen as well. Recently I had one that I thought I was really close to, and she took a significant portion of business and pretended that it wasn't happening and it was happening. And, so there's things that happen, when you're a business owner that are frustrating and difficult and challenging that I think it's hard, but at the same time, I also have a team. Most of the people who've been with me, one person's been with me for 15 years. Another one has been with me for 8, another's been for 6. I think my newest has been here for about a year. So the most people have actually come and stayed. But again, it's
Yeah,
hard. It's not easy. It is definitely not easy. And I think people are like, "Oh, it's just easy to have your own practice." And it's like, no, it's a real business. You are running a business, and that is a lot of additional demands. And if you really enjoy being your own boss, it's great. It's awesome. If you really enjoy, if you're really a kind of stick to it kind of person and go after it, and make it happen and do your way and do it in a way that is where you're really driven. It's fantastic. If you really want just a job, it's not for you. But I also offer this weird opportunity where if you're a person who wants to be a therapist in private practice, but not have all the responsibility of running your own business, I am the one who runs the business and you get to be a private practitioner, that you get to do your own thing and do it how you want to, and you get to have all that perk. And so that's kind of my business model.
gotcha. No, and that's having a business at one point with over 100 employees, most of them clinicians.
Wow.
I think in general, it goes well and you get people that mesh and it's a nice team. And then occasionally it's rare, but you do have to fire people. And I think, I think you're very correct that a lot of people don't understand the behind the scenes, what it does take to run the business and everything else involved there. And
it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, and you're very right. Some practitioners really, let me just go and see my patients and get a paycheck, and that's what I want to do. And to bring those models for the people that want to do that, and then if you're setting it up for them, taking a reasonable percentage or cut or however it works, it tends to be a win-win and can be very helpful. And I think that, with telehealth or with the pandemic, there's been a lot of changes in our field, and it's a good segue to our next question, which is a little bit about, if you could change something about the state of the mental health field, do you have something on the top of your mind that you wish were different?
Oh God, give me a list. There's so many things that I wish were different. I just feel like I'm really alarmed at training of therapists. I think I worry about it because it's so focused on telehealth and it's so focused on making that normal. And research doesn't bear that out. Research shows that being in person is actually best Our nervous system operates in connection with others and being in person with other people. So I love the fact that we have this ability to be able to use technology, but at the same time, it's become a substitute and it's just not as effective. You know, when I was talking about this with somebody else, we were talking about the fact that when I'm doing therapy with you and I'm doing it over a screen, I feel like I'm watching TV, or you feel like you're watching TV. Like there's such a disconnect in that experience. And then, you know, I'm more distracted. To be real, as a therapist, like if my phone goes off or whatever, I'm just as tempted as everybody else to kind of like, well, let me do the do thing, you know, this other thing over here, because that's what you do when you watch TV,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's what we do. And as a therapist, like I'm also a somatic therapist, so I'm looking at your body all the time. I want to see your whole body. I can't read half of what's going on if I don't have access to being able to see your full being, and like small movements or changes that happen, I'll miss. You miss that on a screen, you know, and it's too distracting. You're distracted all the time. And like even right now, as we're talking, I keep looking at my own picture. You know, I want to put it up. You know, I need to hide that actually, because that is distracting.
No, yeah. Go ahead, Parker. Sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say, I'm curious because so a lot of the time when we ask the guests that we've had about that question, you know, a lot of them do talk about wanting to see more accessibility for therapy, which I think we can all agree is a great thing. And generally, when we're talking about telehealth, the primary benefit that usually gets mentioned is the increased accessibility to services. So I totally understand everything that you're saying, and I think that makes complete sense. So I'm kind of curious, you know, from your perspective, what would be an effective way to tackle the accessibility issue of mental health services?
I mean, right now, I think there's a lot of accessibility. You know, I think that we talk about it as though there's lack, but I don't really see that. I see that there's a huge number of therapists and there's a lot of people getting services. I think what I experience, especially being in a city, you know, because I mean, I do get people who call from places that aren't, and I do telehealth, you know. Um, and so I'll work with people who are from remote areas for sure. But what I see is people in the city who are just like, I just don't feel like getting in my car and coming to you. Or I want to be able to sit and like smoke weed on my bed while I do therapy. Like, no, get your butt in the car, get to the office. You know, I really think that it's a disservice. Also, I think that we have gotten crazy with let's do email therapy, let's do text therapy. I don't know how that's not completely unethical. I don't know why the boards aren't stepping in and saying, no, absolutely not. This is absolutely inappropriate. That is not therapy. It's just not therapy. That's not how it works.
Yeah, no, that's a great comment actually, and how it's been, certain companies have been able to market that text with your therapist between 9 and 5, and you know, text therapy it's just not something that's real. And I think Parker, to your point and Cindy's comment, that what's happened with, and Cindy, please correct me if I'm wrong here, but what's happened with training programs now, especially, is the telehealth piece makes it a little more convenient for the schools.
Yeah.
And, you know, it makes it
and
so
clinics
that, and the clinic
and hospitals.
So people are taking that convenience factor over the in-person experience with the training, which is a negative for the.
It's a huge negative. And come on, research doesn't support it.
So yeah, and I think it's, yeah, you know, it's one thing for people in Fresno, you know, in rural counties or who don't have transportation, et cetera. That's where telehealth has been great and very helpful. But yeah, you know, as Cindy mentioned, that being in the room and reading all the signals and having to turn your phone off and put it away, it's both logical and founded by research that when possible, that is what we should be doing.
I think for me too, because I'm a trauma specialist, the other piece is that I'm working with your body. I'm working, I sometimes I'm actually using hands-on approaches. And so it limits what I can do. And the stuff that I'm trained in is so profoundly effective when you're in person, where I can do something somatically um, to help relieve trauma, and I can help relieve it quickly if I have you in the room. But if you're not in the room, I can't do it. I can't actually do the interventions in a way that are going to be the most effective to be able to relieve the symptoms. And so that's really discouraging as well, because
Yeah.
I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to use whatever tool is in my toolbox to really help you. So it is really a disservice.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't provide the kind of service that I'm trained for to be able to offer, that is cutting edge, that is huge. I do a lot of different kinds of stuff. I mean, the other thing that I'm trained in is ketamine assisted psychotherapy, right? I don't want to necessarily do that where I'm not in the room with you. I mean, that takes away so much of that experience,
Right.
you know?
Very good. Very good. Flipping to more positive, is there anything you're excited about in our field right now?
Yeah, actually. I am actually really kind of surprised that I got into this. But I started doing ketamine assisted therapy with what's called Journey Clinicals. They're part of the people who are doing the research in the use of psychedelics in psychotherapy. And they have a really cool program structure that they do where you're really working with the doctors who prescribe, and they're prescribing at low dose of ketamine, not high dose, which is what a lot of people are doing, which I think is insane. But the way that it's set up, I have had the most amazing results. It's been so exciting. And I'm really excited with the MDMA research that is coming out, the stuff on psilocybin, the stuff on LSD. I mean, there is some hugely promising stuff coming up that is really exciting. So from the mental health perspective, especially in the trauma arena, these are some things that I am seeing some really great results, and it is really cool. It's really fun.
Very, very neat. Yeah, all initial research, as you mentioned, if the dosing is done correctly and the
Yeah.
the psychotherapy component is done correctly, especially for trauma, does seem very promising. And we've of course, with anything new, there's been a lot of misuse and changes in how things are happening,
Very much so.
and
Yeah,
that
I've seen some things that are really unethical with the ketamine stuff. And, the way that we're doing it is it's sublingual and it's low dose, and it's just enough to be able to do the experience and then process it. And you do it like maybe, once a month at most, or maybe once every 2 weeks at most, but you maybe do like 4 sessions or, limited sessions. So you're not going to create the addiction problem that can come up with any drug, a drug like ketamine. But B, you're also not over reliant on that kind of experience. But I take at least 3 hours to go through a journey with someone so that I'm really processing the psychedelic experience and really helping build and integrate on the things that are about, here's the skills while your brain and your subconscious is open. Let's build in these new skills, these new perspectives. Wow, that is a game changer.
awesome.
That has been a game changer, which has been so great to see that kind of progress in people.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool.
And Cindy, is there something in the mental health field that you'd like to shed more light on, or from your years of experience and treatment and practice, something to look towards for the future, or something we need more awareness about?
In terms of topics, or
topics or treatments, or the business, or as a consumer, a clinician, or it's a very broad question, acknowledge.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I'm cautionary about is some of the new tech stuff, like technology getting overly involved in, treatment. I think that's been something that we need to be really careful about. I think you know, I'm a real believer in private practice for a lot of people to do the private practice route. One of the reasons is I think that when somebody comes in and they're paying for their own therapy, I do think that there's like an energy exchange in that, right? Like I'm investing my own hard-earned money into something, and I'm putting, you know, a certain expense into it to get more out of it. I think there's this exchange that happens there that is really important. And so I tend to draw away from like using, you know, relying on insurance. I don't take any insurance at all for, you know, a lot of for that reason, because I've found that, you know, when like when therapists are caught into doing it, you know, insurance or whatever, that oftentimes the quality of care that a client receives, not because necessarily the therapist, but because the client is paying less or putting less in. I kind of don't like therapy necessarily under the medical model. So that's kind of the thing that I was thinking about, is I think that we need to kind of be thinking about those kinds of things and being a little bit more aware of, like, you know, practices with telehealth and stuff like that. I think that it's too much of the Wild West right now. I think that we need to be careful.
That's it is the Wild West on, yeah, on all levels, from, you know, prescribing practices to what's happening
Yes.
with the therapy practices. And yeah, it's a good analytic or psychodynamic comment about, yeah, that money exchange and the investment into treatment and care, that when you're paying more than a $10 copay, you know, there is some extra motivation, connection, energy around that translates into the therapy process and piece. And it's cool, you know, the answer most people give for not working with insurances is because it's like slow torture, death, trying to be stuck on the phone, other pieces. But there are these other components that can negatively affect care that come along with that. And it's really nice that you brought that piece up, which has been looked at a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with the other side. I'm in a position in my business where I could take insurance if I chose to. You know, I could afford to take that time and to get paid later and go through all the hoops. I feel like I'd rather have the negotiation with the client and be really focused in client-centered work. And I feel like I don't want a lot of my energy going outward to other things. I want my energy to stay focused in the work of therapy. So one of the things that I do is offer lower rates, and I slide my scale so that it is more accessible and affordable. And I have a lot of group therapy, different groups that I offer, and to be able to offset cost. Because I want people to access the service. I want them to be able to get the best of the best care and be able to afford it. So that is kind of my model. I hold myself to a very high standard, and I really believe in what I do. But I want clients who also are like really committed to the process and the journey, so that they win, you know, so that they get the most out of it. So to me, that's also where I think we're over reliant on insurance companies to pay for therapy.
Gotcha. Good comments. Interesting comments. Yeah. And that's another, you're the first person to also bring up that, yeah, group therapy can be a great way and a much more affordable way for people to still get excellent care. So it's great that you offer that.
Can you
and I love group therapy. I love doing group therapy.
Yeah, can you tell us about the different types of groups that you offer and who chose the themes that you cover?
Yeah, a lot of times we'll build groups around the kinds of things that our clientele are working on. So right now we have a sexual trauma group. We have PTSD groups. I have a complex trauma DID group. So that's like for multiple personality and people who've gone through extreme abuse. I have a transgendered group for transgender women, and I have just a general queer group, and that's for, you know, a multitude of queer identities. That also includes like polyamory and fetish community, LGBTQI. You know, I have some transgender people in that group as well. We have one group that is more of a mindfulness journaling art group. So we do offer a lot of different kinds of groups. And it's really fun. I mean, it's really fun. We always have them limited to 6 people. And we put people in that we know are going to produce the most growth for one another. And so super, super fun, super cool. But I never do group without them being an individual. They have to be an individual.
Great
It's a
comment.
compliment. Yeah, a lot of people want to come to just group, and I won't do that because really group therapy is a supplement to individual. It's not meant to be its own separate therapy.
Great comment. Yeah, very good.
And at your practice, there's 5 of you, correct?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And so do all of you have similar specialties, or do you each kind of have your own specialties? How do you, how do you go about matching the client with the therapist?
So when I hire therapists, I want therapists who have different experiences than me or different modalities because I want to have as much to offer as possible. So I do have someone who is like Gottman trained and does couples therapy from Gottman perspective. One is from the Transpersonal Institute.
Oh yeah.
And so it's more of a spiritual, somatic based approach. It's phenomenal. Wow. I mean, my therapists are so great. I have some that are more cognitive behavioral, more traditional cognitive behavioral focus. And because I'm not a big Cog B person, it's really nice to have somebody who is one who does more parenting issues, working with more, parenting, families. I try to mix up ethnicity so that we have, representation, at least from different groups. So I try to create like a blend so that we have as much to offer as possible to be able to reach a broader, scope. Some people specialize in men's issues. So I tend to work more with women and gay men, whereas other people may work with more with the straight men. And I want to make sure that all of our clientele are really supported and given specialized treatment and help. So I try to do the best I can in terms of mixing it up. And so when we get clientele, my business manager is the one who actually fields the calls. And she disperses based on who's going to be most likely the best fit for that particular client, based on the kinds of needs, what they're coming to work on, what kind of therapist maybe they're going to work better with. If she's not sure, then I will tend to meet with the client and I may make a recommendation for which therapist, or even if it's outside of our practice, maybe we're not the right fit for them, but I do know somebody who would be, I'll refer out.
Very, very cool. And it's refreshing to hear that sort of collaborative, and let's bring in people who do different things. And sometimes that's lacking in our field, where people would be threatened by, it's the CBT therapist versus the dynamic therapist. Like you see some of this stuff, and I've always been one that wanted, similar to you, like let's bring in all levels of training and different modalities and treatments, and let's have harmony. There's no reason to.
Well, as a clinical, the thing that also is, as a clinical team, having those different perspectives, having the different approaches, my gosh, how many more tools do you have in your toolbox as a result of that? I mean, there was one point, and I really wish I still had this. I had a DBT therapist, and it was so great to be able to offer DBT groups. Like I really miss having that. And so if there's anybody out there who wants to, I am so open and ready for a DBT person. But I really enjoy having people from different backgrounds and modalities because I just think it makes this so much better.
Very true.
Well, I think a good question to ask would be, are you hiring right now? Are you looking for any more therapists to come on and join the LA Therapy Network?
So if somebody is a good fit for our group, then I welcome them. I don't need other therapists right now, but it's definitely like if somebody was a really good match for our group and they really had something to offer and bring to the table, then I would bring them in. Basically the way that we work is, it's not like I'm employing a therapist, they're a contractor. So I hire independent contractors. So it's like we have overage and here's the right fit for you. And so that's kind of how somebody grows with us. And each of the therapists really, they're going to either make it or break it. They're going to either, grow their own clientele base from the people we refer, or they're not, if they can't hold it and they don't have that particular skill, it's not going to happen for them. So that's kind of how that works for us.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I've done a W-2 model before where we had a little more monitoring and control over making sure patients were doing well, and then right now in our nonprofit, we're doing more of the model like yourself, where it's going to be more independence to some of the practitioners there for mentoring type roles, but it's the pros and cons to 1099 versus W-2 approach.
Well, for my particular business, because I do work with such extreme cases of complex trauma, the skill level of therapists has to be higher. So I only hire therapists who are licensed, and they have to have a specialization in trauma.
Gotcha.
So that is a caveat. They have to have training, and that is more than your traditional trauma-informed training. They have to have something deeper, because you have to be able to handle whatever walks in the door.
Very good.
So there is some, and that is one of the reasons that it is more of an independent contractor model, because you need to be able to handle whatever you get, and you have to be, skilled enough and professional enough to be able to do that.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, any of our Southern California groups, if you need to send patients, or any of clinicians listening who feel like they'd be a good fit, Cindy's been awesome to talk with and engage with, and I feel like that mentoring and leadership persona comes through when we talk to you, and that's really nice to see.
Thank you. I have really enjoyed talking with you guys. It was really fun to just originally meet you, and thank you for having me today.
Yeah, of
Very
course.
good.
And just so everybody knows, it is latherapynetwork.com. Well,
thank you.
Yeah, great. It's Cindy, it's been excellent having you. And I think we can go ahead and wrap things up here. Does that sound good to the both of you?
Great.
All right,
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining for this week's episode of the Sit and Stay podcast, brought to you by RipsyTech. If you have questions you would like to submit to our audience Q&A, or are interested in featuring as a guest like Cindy on the show, send us an email at sitandstay@ripsytech.com. All right. Tom, Cindy, it's been great, and I will see you both later.
Thanks, Parker.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Sit and Stay podcast. Until we meet again, we invite you to sit and stay with the ideas and stories shared today. Dive deeper into how RipsyTech can support your practice by visiting us at ripsytech.com.